I'm Denise Davis-Gaines, and I'm your Embody Lab Zoom host today. And she's going to be presenting on cultural landscapes of secure relationships through Indigenous approaches to therapy. Elaine is a senior lecturer and Indigenous researcher working for the Auckland University of Technology, Faculty of Health and Environmental Sciences. She manages dual responsibilities as the associate head of the School of Māori Advancement, School of Public Health, and the Interdisciplinary Studies, and leadership roles with the Weora Māori Health Research Center. These include program and lecturing responsibilities for undergraduate and postgraduate Māori health studies and violence and trauma postgraduate studies. Elaine's research activities focus on violence prevention with an interest in developing evidence-based Māori and Indigenous therapeutic interventions. Elaine is the current co-chair of the New Zealand Health Quality and Safety Commission, Child Youth Morality Review Committee. She's an active member of her Indigenous community and was raised in the traditional lands of the Ngati Watau people. Elaine is a registered psychotherapist, a member of the New Zealand Association of Psychotherapists, and a founding member of Waka Oranga, National Collective for Maori Psychotherapy Practitioners. I apologize for anything I've done to the names of these wonderful organizations, and I promise to learn them better for future reference. Welcome, Dr. Elaine.
Kia ora. Tēnā ra koutou katoa I ngā hau e whā, Raurangatira mā. I greet you all who have gathered from the four winds between Ranginui, Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, Earth Mother. So greetings to all the traditional land owners on unceded territories. I acknowledge your elders, past and present, and I acknowledge all of us as kaitiaki, guardians of the land and sky and everything in between. I want to thank the organisers at Embody Lab for the opportunity to gather with you all today. And I want to thank all of you who are in attendance that I may or may not be able to see. It is a real pleasure being here with you all, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. I also want to thank all the presenters who have presented today. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, it's Monday morning, and I understand for many of you, you are now moving into either the evening or late afternoon. So, nō reira, tēnā ra koutou katoa. In other words, warm greetings once again. Thank you, Denise. And I acknowledge, it's not always easy when you're trying to read, somebody else's language or trying to make those pronunciations. So thank you for that effort. That's actually going to be something that I will be focusing on today in this presentation. But before we get there, I just really want to open up this presentation with a prayer. And I think I'll just, get on with it and start this session with prayer, which is a traditional way of centering ourselves and helping us to stay focused on the purpose of our meeting. So that's one way in which we use prayer, and that's the way in which I'll be doing that today. So, kia hora te marino, kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi I te pō, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. And so in that prayer there, we're asking for peace to be widespread. We're asking that the sea be like the greenstone, and the greenstone is a very precious treasure to us as Māori people. And we're asking that the pathway for this evening and for the day, for those of you who are entering into a new day, be given with love, receive with love, and that we show respect for each other. Kia ora. We did have some technical difficulties getting started, and I will have to work through that through this presentation. So what I've prepared today, I thought it would be easier if I went through a PowerPoint presentation to begin with, and that's simply to help everyone orientate themselves to myself, my culture, and some of the values that are espoused within that culture. So with the help of the ladies that are here, I'm hoping I'm going to be able to share my screen with you. So I just want to say a little bit about where I am located in the world. So Aotearoa, New Zealand. I hope you've heard of it. It surprises me how many people have heard of it, and then it also surprises me how often people have never heard of it, or sometimes think that we are one of the states that exists within Australia, New Zealand. So I've just put this up so that you can see where we are actually located in the world. There's only really one other stop past New Zealand, and that's the South Pole. So it's, yeah, we're quite a distance away from most people in the world. Yeah. So in terms of New Zealand, as Māori people, we refer to this country as Aotearoa. Aotearoa, then we say New Zealand. Aotearoa, the quick translation for that, means land of the long white cloud. And that had much to do with the time that our ancestors discovered these lands. And in terms of who I am and who my ancestors are, Māori people are the Indigenous people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. We belong to the Pacifica groups of people in the South Pacific, and so we have strong links to our South Pacific cousins. Before I start talking about the points that I want to make today, I just really want to say and acknowledge that the socio-cultural considerations are really, really important when we talk about and we think about trauma. So the cultural context makes a difference, and so it's acknowledging those differences for all of us wherever we are located in the world. So understanding that trauma can occur anywhere, anytime, and it can also occur at any age and stage in life, which I'm sure you are all aware of. And also that trauma impacts people differently and with different levels of severity. And I think that's a really important point. And also to add that it takes faith and courage to heal. I use the word faith deliberately, and I centre that or locate that within our specific worldview in what we would call a Te Ao Māori worldview. Excuse me. And so, like many other Indigenous cultures around the world, Māori people have, been unfortunately experienced the damage and harms of colonisation and the impacts of not just the past, but in the present as well. So part of this focus is also about historical trauma, and that when we talk about historical trauma, we understand that this is collective and shared trauma. So it's not just held by the individual, that it's held by more than one person. So just to say something about the cultural landscape here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have as Māori people experienced the harms of inequities and disparities, and these have been enduring. So there have been some major changes occurring here in Aotearoa, and a lot of that push has come from Māori communities. And when I say it's been enduring, it's part of the colonising impact that we haven't been able to enjoy the same level of health as other non-Māori New Zealanders. So there's been some very recent changes here in New Zealand around the improvements in the health system, which has been much needed. But I do have to add that there have been improvements for some people here in New Zealand, but they haven't occurred at the rate that is necessary for Māori people. So we still continue to experience those health disparities and inequalities in health. And so what we are pushing for, we Māori and the new health system, is we are wanting to have those improvements designed by us, decided by us, and developed for us. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today as well, in terms of how we achieve that in the research space. And you may be wondering when I'm going to get to this semantic attachment and what that means from our particular worldview. But if you just bear with me, we will get there. So one of the efforts that has been occurring within Indigenous communities worldwide, and especially here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is research that is based on Māori knowledge systems. And what we call that here is either Māori-centred research or Kaupapa Māori research. So it is specific, Kaupapa Māori research is specific to Indigenous Māori people. And we do that in an effort and an attempt to find the solutions within our own communities for our peoples. And often we will hear people down here say Kaupapa Māori, for Māori, with Māori, by Māori. We know as Indigenous people and who have been through colonising experiences that research has often been an awful experience for us. So we have had the experience of research being used against us by observers who do not have the inside knowledge about what happens in our communities. And we've been really, it's caused a lot of damage in the past, and that continues as well. So this is part of our emancipation, is to be able to develop and design research by us, for the benefit of our people, and using critical theory to inform the way in which that research unfolds. So one of the areas that I've worked in, and I've now moved into the research space, so I'm researching in this area, has to do with my interest in child mental health and work with mothers and children and whānau. Whānau is the word that we use to mean family. It doesn't translate simply as family. It is a bit, there's a bit more to it than that, but for now we'll use the word family. And so that's some of the work that I was doing when I was working in practice as a psychotherapist. And we've just come through, well, actually the findings from the abuse and care inquiry here in New Zealand, the findings oh no, they're due to be released next year actually, so they're not out yet. But that's been a really lengthy process. And I think what we experience here as Indigenous Māori is very similar to some of the patterns that we've been seeing overseas in other Indigenous communities. That's high incarceration rates for Māori men and women, overrepresented negatively in the mental health statistics, and also the removal of our children into care. And so this report came out in 1988. It's called Puao Te Atatu. And it really speaks to the challenges of institutionalised racism and the removal of Indigenous children into state care. What the Abuse and Care Inquiry and the testimonies of those adults who, as young people, were in care, overwhelmingly speak to the abuse that they experienced whilst in care. And the harms of that have been, again, enduring and, negatively impact on not just at the family level, but at a whole societal level for us as Māori people in Aotearoa. And so this is one of the quotes that is taken from the Puao Te Ata Tū report, written in 1988. The sad thing about that, it wasn't taken seriously then. We are pulling it out now to say you ignored your own report. We need to take it seriously. And at the heart of the issue is a profound misunderstanding or ignorance of the place of the child in Māori society and its relationship with whānau hapu and iwi structures. So this report here, I just want to say, has motivated me a lot in terms of the way in which I practice or was practicing when I was in practice. But it certainly motivated me a lot in terms of the research focus that I want to take. And that's to improve outcomes for what we call our tamariki children and mokopuna grandchildren. And this slide here just speaks to the changes that are currently happening in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So we have a Ministry of Health, and we have Te Whatu Ora, which is Health New Zealand, and Te Aka Whai Ora, the Māori Health Authority. So those two authorities must work together to determine, look at the indicators for good health, to reduce the inequities, and to determine how those health dollars are spent. Also here in New Zealand, we have a number of developing health models. This one here has been around for a little while, since the 1990s, developed by Professor Mason Jury. And the reason I'm pulling this one out, like I said, there are others, and there are new and emerging health models. But there's some key features about our health models, and one of those features is that they are holistic, meaning that the family is to be viewed within a holistic context. And at the centre of every Māori health model you will find is te taha wairua. What we call te taha wairua is the spiritual dimension of health. Again, I don't think that's unique to us as Indigenous Māori people. I think you find that in certainly other cultures around the world. In fact, I know you do. So again, this is just what it looks like from our worldview here as Māori people in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So te taha wairua speaks to the spiritual health of an individual and of the whānau. Te taha whānau speaks to the family health, and more than just the family health, but also those really important social connections and social relationships. Te taha hinengaro, actually I've just realised I'm probably saying these words too fast. Te taha hinengaro really speaks to the psychological and the emotional health of a person, and again of the whānau. So it's always the individual within the context of others, which is whānau, family. Okay. Te taha tinana speaks about the physical health and well-being. And because these are Māori health models, it's important that these components are conveying language, the appropriate language, connection to the environment, that they're also conveying the importance of our spiritual beliefs, and also those relational values and intergenerational relationships as well. And so, again, I think in other cultures, similarly, it's not uncommon to have intergenerational living circumstances where you would have mum, the children, grandparents, maybe even a cousin or other people present in the home. I'm actually just wondering if now might be a point where if anybody had a question or two or needed me to clarify something, we could go there now, Denise. Because, you know, I understand we're working with different languages here.
Sounds good. We'll open the chat up for everyone. You can ask your questions. We have a few questions that are being listed for you. I can read them while everyone's typing other questions for you. We have one or two questions that have come in already. And it is, let's see. If anyone has questions, you can pop them into the chat box, or you can put your hand up if you have a question for Dr. Elaine. Okay, here we go. Kalista, would you like to unmute? If you can unshare your screen, Elaine, then I can spotlight both of you so you can have a.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well, just before you spotlight, I actually wanted to ask about the house, and I'm sorry if you spoke to it and I missed it. I'm finding so much what you're speaking about is so relevant to living and working in Canada. Our Indigenous nations have been absolutely, you know, we have the systemic racism that has destroyed family units, and there's a lot of like still colonial policy we're dealing with. So as a counselor, I work with lots of these humans who have been traumatized by the system and continue to be, not just a past thing. But I love the picture of the house, but I was curious, was there like when each thing was pointing to the sides and to, like, was spirituality meant to be the door, or was it just more like there was just a house and it's all inclusive?
Oh, thank you so much for your question, and I'll leave that frame there. I'll continue sharing so we can all look at the house. If you see me looking up to the right, it's because I can see you in a little square box to the right of me on my screen. Okay, so Te Whare Tapawhā really speaks to the four sides of the house, and it considers that each of those posts or the four corners of the house need to be standing strong in order for the house to stand. So if one is weakened, if one of those structural posts is weakened, then the health of the individual is also weakened. So it's a metaphorical way of speaking about health holistically, using the structure of the whare, what we call the whare nui, to explain that. Yeah. So I don't actually have an image at the moment to share with you, but our traditional homes are generally carved. They have carvings in them. And if you see them today without the carvings, that's generally because of the impacts of Christianity on our society. So in this model here, that's what Mason Dury has done. He talks about the four cornerstones of health and likens them to the four posts, or the four pillars and the sides of the wall of the house. So thank you for asking that question. Please ask further if you would like more clarity.
There's another question here. Jody wonders how, if or how societal health relates to the health model, if at all.
Yeah, well, there's this whole, that's a good question. There's this whole discussion about, the state as parent, and in our experience, the state has been a very punitive parent. And so I do think we have to look at some of those systemic issues. And so what I talk about, and I think other people might talk about this as well, I talk about how the personal is always political. And for us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we are born political, whether we are aware of that or not. And so we've come through a system where, depending on who the current government is of the day, you know, 1 year the playing field might look like A, and then we'll have a new political party serving for a term of 3 or 4 years or whatever it might be. And then the playing field changes for us. So we liken that to somewhat being kicked around the football field and passed around the football field like a football. Yeah, so it's been very damaging for us. And the difficult thing about that is that we haven't experienced that continuity of care that should occur at the macro level.
Mhm. Thank you. Ellen, fine. Would you like to unmute?
Sure. I'm finding this very wonderful and interesting so far. My question is in relationship to the land, and I guess I would certainly extend that to the ocean and the sea. You know, just for myself, and I'm not in an Indigenous community, I cry a lot over the land and the destruction of the land. And I am connected with many Indigenous people near where I live. And, you know, if you could talk about that relationship and how that to the land and what has happened since, you know, colonization, and how that affects the mental, societal health as well, and family health as well.
Kia ora, Ellen. Thank you for your question. When I use the word kia ora means good health to you. It's an acknowledgement of the person that is speaking. It doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with the spoken word, but that we acknowledge who we are as human beings, that we are connected, and we are connected through our environment, through the land, through what we call the whenua, through a higher being. You know, we believe in Creator, you know. Creator created for us. We believe in Rangi Nui as Sky Father, and we believe in Papatuanuku as Earth Mother. And so our language, we have a lot of terms within the language. It's a language of dualities. So just to give you an example of that duality, whenua, the word whenua means land, but it means more than land, okay? Whenua is to do with the mother's placenta. And when mother gives birth, her whenua is given back to Earth Mother, Papatuanuku, to the whenua. So whenua ki te whenua, from this mother's placenta to Earth Mother's placenta. So that there again is about that spiritual connection and those spiritual beliefs that we have about the primordial mother, Papatuanuku, who was all giving and caring and sharing of us, although, you know, there's a lot to be said about how well we do in terms of looking after her. So a really, really important question, because that's to do with what we call te tai ao, the environment. So in this picture that you see here, you see the house, and that house is always located within environment. So when we think about attachments, for us, that attachment starts with Mother Earth. And we always give back to her. So that's a mother's way of giving thanks, if you like, to Mother Earth, is to return her own placenta to Mother Earth so we can enrich and nourish her so that she can give back in return to others. So another word that's really important in this conversation is whenua, all right? So I've explained what those two things are. The other is hapu. Hapu in our world talks about sub-tribes, okay? But hapu also means to be pregnant. So here you have this language of duality once again that is always tied to the environment. So there's always a spiritual connection with the Māori language and environment and to the higher source of being and beings that we call atua. So God, io matua kore, is the one we refer to as the parentless one, the creator. Okay. Slow me down if this is not making sense. Or if you'd like me to go back over something, please let me know. And and then Eeyore had children, and probably the easiest way for me to say this is that he had some. Well, actually, I just said he. He is not a he. He is non-gendered. Eeyore matua kore is non-gendered. Okay. But Eeyore had children who were male and children that were female. And we acknowledge just the omnipotent power, if you like, of the winds, of the ocean currents, of the seas. And so we have names for all of which we consider to be gods, because they came from God. They came from Atua. So Atua meaning God is a simple way of translating that. But now, when we speak our language, we just say Atua, Atua. And we're referring to that higher power and all things created thereafter. So I've gone a little bit away from the word hapu. Hapu means to be both pregnant, and it also is what we reference as being the sub-tribe. So we come from a nationhood. So iwi, it's spelled I-W-I. And then the iwi is made up of a number of sub-tribes. But the key point here about being hapu, a mother being pregnant, and we refer to a pregnant mother as hapu mama, a pregnant mother. And the sub-tribe simply means multiple births, the number of births that have occurred to formulate a community. So at the bigger nationwide level, we talk about iwi, and iwi is related to another word, ko iwi, and ko iwi is to do with the bones, so the bones of our people. And the bones of our people buried in certain locations and places, again, all interconnected with whenua and papatūānuku. Thank you for asking that question, Ellen. I appreciate that. Yeah.
There's one more question here in the chat box. Amy says she has a friend who lives there who is trying to build relationships with students and families in order to better represent and create a curriculum that fits the needs of the Maori people. She asks, do you have any advice on how progress can be made at the local educational level, specifically within the teacher-student relationship?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Kia ora. Well, I can tell you this, that this is somebody who works in the education space. That has not been an easy thing to achieve, and we are currently on that pathway right now, and that's one of the roles that I have within the university that I'm located in. The key and critical thing here is to develop your networks, is to be centred within Māori communities, whether those communities exist within the universities or external to the universities or training institutions. It is important to be connected. Okay, so here we say nothing about us without us. And that term there can be applied to a number of different situations. But nothing about us without us means that it's really critical to ensure that you've got Māori represented at the table. So where those really important decisions are being made about curriculum. Now, what we know about curriculum and curriculum development in many countries, not just New Zealand, is that they are dominated by Western ideology and Western theories, and that has not been helpful to us. That's not to dismiss the importance of those theories, but when they dominate, what they do is they marginalise our knowledge systems, and that's not okay. We've experienced enough marginalisation. We don't need any more of that. But we need to be centering and focusing our education system towards other ways of knowing. Yeah. So yes, it's critical to build that network. However, the other thing that's really, really important, if you're a non-Indigenous person or non-Māori person here in Aotearoa, is the issue about allyship. Now, allyship involves a person to be able to have a good understanding about the current context and the historical context of the place in which you're situated, to understand the mechanisms of power, being able to, people say to me, because we've been through colonizing, and we continue to go through these colonizing processes, sometimes people say, oh, well, now you've got to decolonize yourself. Well, actually, I don't want to spend the rest of my life decolonizing myself. I want to encourage my non-Māori colleagues and peers to do that work, to decolonize the system, to understand the power that exists within the system, so that they don't become barriers to good health and well-being for our people. So part of that healing really has to occur at that very macro level, to have those good, healthy impacts at the micro level for marginalised communities as we are. Sometimes we think about, or we have a tendency to think that displacement, or we think about externally displaced people, but there's been, as Māori people, we've, been internally displaced in our own country, off our own lands and things like that. So we're not located necessarily on our traditional lands. I've been fortunate to have grown up for, most of my life on the lands of my tupuna, my elders. So that was a long answer to your question, I think, but I just, we could talk about this probably longer, but there's more in the presentation. But allyship is so important. Yeah. Sorry,
would you like to get back to the presentation and we can make room for questions?
Well, I kind of figure that even if I move along the presentation, there'll be more questions. So I quite like the idea of being able to dialogue with people, if that's okay. I see David has his hand up, so I'm happy to answer David's, hear his question.
Go ahead and unmute, David.
Thank you very much. I'm a Pakeha from Taranaki.
Kia ora, David.
Kia ora. I have one main question. I have a lot of grief over it, a lot of grief as a Pakeha.
Well done. Yes.
The question is, you talk to me a bit about the impact of the Pakeha government on, and I believe this happened in the mid-1900s. The Pakeha government, I believe, made it illegal for the Maori to live and sleep together as one in the longhouse. I'd like to hear from you as a Maori, the impact of this division upon the tribe, the family, the individual on a mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual values.
Yeah, Kia ora, David. Thank you for your question, and I can I feel the pain in that question as well. So I appreciate you coming forward. All right, I think I want to preface this response or reply around the different acts. Okay, and there have been a number of them, so we won't have time to go through all of them. But one of those acts was the Tohunga Suppression Act. Now, the Tohunga were our specialists, our health and wellbeing. You could call them our doctors if you like. And so no other ethnic group in this country, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, have had as many acts put in place to essentially marginalise Indigenous people. So displace them from their lands, displace them from their culture, you know, and those sorts of things. So I'm not sure about the accuracy of the information that you have, David, in terms of your question. But what I will say is that it will be a number of factors converging, coming together, a combination of the different acts that were put in place. And a lot of those acts were put in place to cede Māori, you know, to take unlawfully, in our view, unlawfully take our lands. And the other big influencer here too was Christianity on our people. And so Christianity has protection in law in a way that we don't. So the Tohunga Suppression Act only served to, once again, marginalise our knowledge system, but it also meant it went underground as well. So we couldn't practice that openly. David, I'm not sure if I've, you know, there's quite a lot more information that comes in terms of the question that you're asking. But what I would say to you is there are a number of things that were converging, you know, and the convergence of those, and actually they were dominating factors that, again, that disrupted our knowledge system. And so here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, there's this wonderful man called Tamati Kruger, and he talks about how, you know, as part of that process and the trauma that we've carried, we've internalized a lot of the belief systems that don't belong to us. And he talks about that as imposter tikanga or imposter values. And so when people talk about sometimes, you know, you need to decolonize yourself, I put some of that responsibility, in fact, I put a lot of it back on to our allies, and we need allies to be working, not with Māori, but to be working with yourselves, you know, with each other, yeah, around deconstructing those things in the system that only serve to harm us. And there's no reason why we should have, you know, enduring inequities in our health system here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Yeah.
Yeah, I would prefer that you address the effects on the Māori mentally, emotionally, spiritually on having this division. I got this information 50 years ago on the marae at Waitara by Maori from all over the North Island were celebrating Pamari's birthday. I was one of 2 Pakihas on the marae, and I heard this information coming from the Maori elders about this division I'm addressing with you. I know you've talked about legality of what came from the white man. What I'm more interested in, the effects on the Maori themselves of, at one time, I believed up until the 1900s, they could live actually as a tribe, live and sleep as a tribe in the longhouse. And then the Pakeha government made it illegal to do that and sent them off to live in their own little tiki-taki boxes. State houses. So what I'm looking at is the social, the mental, emotional, spiritual trauma. I'm looking at trauma, how the Māori were traumatized by this division by an outside culture. So I'd like to hear the inside story from the Māori, please.
Well, disconnection certainly did happen. And yeah, and like I said, you know, we're overrepresented in the mental health statistics today. And that's, you know, some of the consequence of being told, no, you can't live like that anymore. No, you can't do the communal, you know, sleeping in the big house, in the wharenui, or the long house, if you've referred to it. And so these are some of the reasons why we think we're overrepresented, you know, negatively today in health. But I will say that we do work hard to you know, maintain and keep to those traditional values. I mean, from my own experience and for many other Māori as well, we do continue to, you know, sleep in the big house together when we come together for different things like funerals, weddings. So that house is still, you know, it's so central to our a secure sense of identity, to who we are. And so the wharenui, the big houses or long houses, are really, really important to us. And so there has been a concerted effort, ongoing effort by Māori to ensure that, you know, we uphold the houses, because the houses are in many ways the storehouses of knowledge. So they're like our libraries, you know. So if you think about the way in which stories and history is recorded and held, well, those are the places. And when you see them in our intricate carved, you know, po and things like that, they will tell a story. And I know, yeah.
So do you do this out of maybe just sort of like a special kind of ritual, or are you actually embracing it of trying to normalize part of the old culture? Another question I want to put out there, and this came from the elders on the Marae Waitara.
Yeah.
They said the Maori, he went in with some phenomenal proverbs. He probably talked for half an hour on this, but to summarize it was, the Maori belongs to the land. The Pakeha wants to own and dominate the land. So in a sense, you have a dichotomy here, totally different philosophy on life, totally different.
Yes, we do. That's right.
So you've been forced with the white man's philosophy. And anyway, so maybe the question would be, how do you keep your own stance with having this outside dominant, totally different influence in your culture as a Maori?
So one of the things that Māori have been actively involved with and engaged with and continue to be engaged with is we are invested in our survival. And so being invested in your own survival is about also having children and having whānau. So that's one way to do that. The other way to do that is the revitalisation and the reclaiming of our knowledge systems. And what I can give you today is an example of how I'm doing that in the research space. So reclaiming knowledge is really, really important, and restoring practices is really, really important as well. And retelling the stories. So the history books have been written in this country according to the writers of those history books. And one of the things that we are very proactively involved with is making sure that our voices are being heard in there as well. And so that's what we've been working to do. We've been working to survive. Yep. And we are in a period right now where you know, we really are in a healing period in time, I believe, as Indigenous Māori, but also as a nation. The nation's got to heal, but we can't do the nation's healing or the dominant Pākehā healing for them. That's not our task to do that. We've got enough to do within our own communities to ensure that, I celebrate the day when we can perhaps be a population of 1 million, which we've never been, which, you know,
There are a
Yep.
couple of other questions in the chat box as well that are coming up. Victoria would love to know more about the dualities existing within the word iwi, koi,
Iwi,
iwi,
yes,
iwi,
yeah,
koiwi, the bones
yeah.
of our people connected to Wenao.
So,
Yeah, she wants to know how it relates to the four posts of the house.
well, the four posts of the house is what looks after and protects the people. We, it's one of those, if you like, not only is it a basic need, but it's also the storehouse of knowledge. It was also where we did a lot of our learning, and a lot of that learning happened in the dark through what we call wānanga style learning. And the house is always built on the whenua of your people. You don't build your house on somebody else's lands, in other words. And so there's the way in which Māori society is constructed. It's around, at the very intimate level, the family which is part of the hapu. And so I talked about that being pregnant and the number of pregnancies will then create the hapu. And so that expansiveness that occurs when that happens. And then at the nationhood level, most of the decision making happens, I have to say, at the whānau or family, hapu level, sub-tribe level. And then there are a number of sub-tribes that make up the nation, which is the iwi. And so the iwi, where the iwi and hapu reside will be marked by different landmarks such as rivers, mountains, and so those are the traditional boundary lines. And so in naming and saying who we are when we introduce ourselves in a Māori way of doing that, those are the things that we are naming to people before we actually say our name. So our name is the last thing we say. What we talk about are the voyaging waka or double hulled canoes that our ancestors voyaged on. We're talking about the mountains and the rivers that have led to our survival. So when we think about the waterways and we think about Tangaroa, the moana, the oceans and the seas, they really are our pantries. And they've kept us alive, and anything that we source from the whenua, from the land, are all life-giving things. And so we didn't have a traditional system of land ownership, not at all. It was about, I'll use the word kaitiaki and kaitiakitanga. So kaitiaki is to be guardians of. So the whole thing around land title and cutting up land in that way was introduced, was brought here and imposed upon us. But we still use those traditional ways of identifying with each other who we are. There are, Māori, we live in contemporary times, so we live in very diverse realities. But we all have what we call whakapapa, and whakapapa talks about genealogy. So being able to recite one's genealogy is a good sign of health, to know where you come from and to know where you'll stand, to know where you stand, to be standing on the lands of your people, and to know that is very, very important. Yeah. So the core iwi have to do with the multiple burials, essentially. So there's this, so our language is very much a language of duality, and dualities. Holistic. It's a holistic language. It's interconnected. Everything is interconnected.
Thank you. I think on the same train, Emma and a few other people would like to follow up with Emma's question about continue to tell them more about the spiritual practices that are used to heal generational trauma and for individual trauma. Like how do you honor the water, the earth, the mountains, the air, the ancestors in that form?
Okay. So I start one example, one way that we do that. So I started this presentation with karakia, with prayer. Okay. Now, in our traditional prayers, because they're more sort of Christian influenced prayers, and then there are the traditional prayers that we give and deliver and hold, and we hold people in prayer. Our traditional prayers don't ask for anything. It's like we don't say things like, God grant me the serenity to, or, we don't do that. We don't ask for anything. We acknowledge. We are simply acknowledging all the time. Really, we are acknowledging the magnificence of life and the world and the waters and everything, the gifts that we've been given for our survival. So there's no asking for anything. It's just an acknowledgement of, the wonders of life itself.
Thank you.
So
And,
that's
yeah. And Clover asks, she says, thank you. And would you please discuss more about the actual methodology and methods employed in the Tohono Māori research project?
okay. So I'll move through the slide now, so we can get there. Thank you. All right. Now this one here relates to the question that, well, not the question that was just asked, but the one prior. It asked about spirituality and how we do that, and that's what I want to be able to show to you today, in terms of what I did in this research study. So Kaupapa Māori research, so I talked about that, and Māori healing practices. So the power of pūrākau, and I'll get to that in a minute, and oriori, so it's about restoring traditional Māori healing practices. Okay, so it's really, as somebody who trained in psychotherapy, I was first introduced to attachment theory then. And I remember when I first, when we were being taught about attachment theory, it just did not look right to me. It just didn't look right. And I was thinking about Mary Ainsworth and the strange situation, the experiment that she set up. And I remember thinking really clearly, as a student sitting there thinking, that really is a strange situation. That is a strange situation to me as a Māori person. And the reason why it seems so strange to me is that Mama, the mother, was left to do all the attachment work. And not just that, but she was on her own, and that's what felt really strange to me. And I was thinking, well, where's everybody else that's supposed to be there with her? Where are the people that hold her to support her to do this really critical and important work? So I really started to question attachment theory, not because I disagree with the fundamentals of attachment theory, but it didn't look like the way in which we did attachment. I mean, there were aspects of it that certainly, I think are common to everyone. But I was really looking for, attachment from our perspective, and it's just not being taught at all. So that led me to go on and do my PhD, which I undertook that, and then I went and did some postdoctoral research, and worked on a couple of projects, and then I did this study here, which was funded by the Health Research Council here in New Zealand, and the report on this is coming out shortly. And so tūhono means to connect. So first we connect, and the study was interested in promoting secure family attachments for our children. So you saw in those earlier slides where I was talking about the need to generate knowledge, new knowledge, and to do that in a way that supports what's needed for our whānau, our families, and our children. And I had a growing concern, and I still have this, and I hold this as a concern, that attachment theory was not being promoted in the right way for our children and our families here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And that partly explains some of the reasons why our children were being removed and taken into state care over and above any other, ethnic group in this country. And that still continues to happen today. So I saw attachment theory as being good, but I didn't see myself in it, and I thought that was really important. If you're going to put anything out there, you need to see yourself in it. It needs to resonate with you. So here's some quick points from the study. So we use Kaupapa Indigenous Māori research methodology. I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. In this particular study, we interviewed 6 kuia karawa. These are elders, and we interviewed them because I wanted to get their perspectives on the appropriate language. And that was one of the other things that I found really difficult and struggled with when I was looking at especially some of the terminology that's used in object relations theories and things like that. That really is just kind of, I guess I found them really abrasive. And again, didn't resonate with me. They weren't the sort of things that I was drawn to, the language I'm talking about here. So in this study, it was really important to determine what the language is and to describe appropriate and ascribe appropriate Māori terminology if we're thinking about that from our worldview. I also did an interview, or we did interviews with a big group of Māori elders, which proved really insightful. And then we did interviews with key informants, which we call pukenga, hauora, so Māori professionals, to get their insights as well about the work that they were doing and the need to repair trauma and these disrupted bonds between our children. Mokopuna is a term we use for a grandchild. And I just want to state here that we are all mokopuna. We are, we've all descended from elders, and so there is that. But the study was more importantly interested in how attachment occurs through a Māori worldview between family members and especially with our babies. And so we interviewed, it was a qualitative study. We interviewed, we had a total of 50 family members involved in the study who gave their perspectives around what secure emotional attachment looks like from a Māori worldview. And then from that, we produced new knowledge. We won't be able to get through all of this today or this evening, but I want to just move on, and because this is really important too. Now, this is only one example, but I pulled this one out for the purpose of today's presentation. So when we look back in some of the written accounts of early observations made by non-Indigenous, mostly, we call the imperialists from England, arrived here. They made these observations anyway. This one here is provided by William Colenso back in 1856, and this is what he had to say about men, and this is important. Their love and attachment to children was great, and that not merely to their own immediate offspring. They very commonly adopted children. Indeed, no man having a large family was ever allowed to bring them up all by himself. Uncles and aunts and cousins claimed and took them, often whether the parents were willing or not. They certainly took every physical care of them, and as they were really chastised, of course, petted and spoiled them. The father or uncle often carried or nursed his infant on his back for hours at a time, and might often be seen quietly at work with the little one there. So, you know, there were other observations made where children were central to the whānau system. They weren't separated out. They were included in meetings and big gatherings and important decision making. The children weren't like left outside, or you go and take care of the children while we have our big meeting. No, that wasn't the case at all. And men were very involved in the caregiving responsibilities of our babies and of our children. Yeah, and the extended family also had the responsibility, not so much a right, but the responsibility to step in if things were not going so well between, for example, the birth mother or birth father and the child or the children concerned. And so this here takes me back to the point that I was making earlier when I was talking about Mary Ainsworth's strange situation, because, you know, like I was saying, at that point in time, I'm going, well, hang on a minute, where's everybody else? This isn't looking right to me. Yep. So again, just a quick overview of the key informant interviews and the number of people involved, the family participation, and obviously I'm using our language in here as well. So the Tāne participation, Tāne are the men, the number of men that were involved in the study, and the Wahine are the number of women involved in the study. Yep. And what you're looking at here is the methodology. This is Kaupapa Māori methodology designed specifically for the Tūhono study. And again, it makes sense that we're going to language things our way and appropriately. But if I just go over this somewhat quickly with you all. So the recruitment strategy, that big long Māori word up there is whanaungatanga. So that's a strategy. You could liken that to snowballing, where you make contact with professionals who might know somebody else that could be interested in a study like this. And so that's how we recruited for the study. The study, we did have some safety measures in place, so it didn't mean that anybody could be involved in the study. They had to meet certain criteria, so there had to be some safety considerations, and we were really interested in knowing what a healthy whānau system, family system looks like, and a healthy way of raising our children, and how that attachment occurs in the early relationships. So then we have this, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but I'm pointing to this long elongated arrow there, Pūrākau data collection method. So the Pūrākau data collection method is allowing families to tell their stories about how secure attachment occurs within their family system. Okay. And then through the centre there, and at the very top there, you'll see whānau, hapu, constellations. All right. So, the way in which our families are constellated, sometimes you can have extended family who are raised in the family system as a sibling or as an aunt or an uncle. So that's not unusual for us to have whānau structures like that. So it's not just about the birth parents that are in that family system, but it's taking account of everybody who has a critical role in raising healthy children. So it was inclusive of those other family members. So we talk about whakapapa whānau. So whakapapa whānau are those family members who are biologically, connected to the child or to the children. So that, could be mum and dad, could be grandparents, whoever the whānau determines is critical to the raising of the child or the children. Then we have at another level whānau hapu constellations, and people would say, how can you have family sub-tribe constellations in your study? Well, actually, it wasn't that difficult because many of the elders in the families were also involved with the affairs of the sub-tribe at the sub-tribe level, and really involved in decision making that happens in the wharenui, in the big houses. So that really wasn't too difficult at all. So it was about being able to get their perspectives as family members, but also their perspectives in terms of their responsibilities at that sub-tribe level, so at the hapu level. And then there's what we call the whāngai whānau. Now, the previous slide spoke to this, actually, that it was not uncommon for us in a traditional Māori caregiving system to have extended family take care of children. And this is a really, really important point in our contemporary times, is because the whāngai system is sometimes referred to as adoptive whānau, but it's not the same as an adopted child, and it's not the same because there's no legalities around it. It's something that is determined by the family about who the whāngai whānau will be. And, you know, children were never adopted outside of the clan group, outside of the hapu. So they always remain somewhere within the hapu. And this is one of the things that we are looking at and we are confronted with today, is that we've had so many of our children removed and taken into care by the state and then abused, taken into care by the state. We haven't had those same traditional rights to be able to raise those children, and the law has determined who those families will be. But it is something that I know we practice that in my family, and we don't, we take on the full responsibility of that child who might be a niece or a grandchild, or but related to me in some way or another. And I've certainly through my adult life, you know, put my hand up to whāngai. And whāngai means the feeding family, the family that feeds the child, to raise and feed the child. So that's the whāngai family. So I've done that at different times, and sometimes it hasn't been needed because things have resolved themselves. And this is important because this becomes one of the critical barriers, especially when there's abuse occurring within a family system, or if there's violence impacting on the family system. The whāngai system is so critical to the safety of children. So we know that secure attachments help to buffer our children as well. And those secure attachments move beyond just the, like I was saying earlier, the birth parents. It does take a village to raise a child. And I used to hear this too when I was doing my psychotherapy training, that it takes a village to raise a child. But when I guess interrogated the methodology, I didn't see the village in the methodology. And so that was another one of those red flags that went up for me. And then there's the kaupapa whānau. The kaupapa whānau, and this is really important in our contemporary times, because we're not all living, and you know, we've experienced all this, you know, displacement from our land, so we don't have as much land as we once did to share. So we don't have that as a resource base in the way that we once did. Yes.
Can I interrupt? A lot of people are leaving because we're almost 10 minutes over the time that the session was supposed to end. And I apologize for interrupting you. This is incredibly interesting, and I'm gonna definitely be following up to learn more. I'm fascinated by everything that you are sharing. It is so incredible. And my apologies, but we do have to end to respect participants, and there's a few other orders of business we have to take care of them. We want to thank you so much. And I apologize again.